Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our Quarter 3 Lunch and Learn. Many of you joined us last quarter for part 1 of this 2-part series on effectively implementing a listen-first marketing strategy. In part 1, we focused on using listening to guide your content strategy, your content creation, and your content distribution. If you missed any of part 1 or if you'd like a refresher, it's all available on our YouTube channel and on our website. Today, in part 2, our focus is on analytics. More importantly, how to use the data available to you as marketers to truly analyze and determine the impact of your marketing efforts, and how to leverage those insights to make informed business decisions. In today's world, having an analytics strategy in place is a must. We have so much data at our fingertips today as marketers, but without a strong and long-term focused analytics strategy in place, you're likely missing out on opportunities to capitalize on trends in your data, and you'll likely never truly understand the full value of your marketing efforts. In today's Lunch and Learn, you'll learn about the detailed process that our analytics team goes through, including our proprietary analytics maturity model, the steps needed to get from a basic level of analytics usage and understanding to a level in which you've closed the loop in your marketing efforts and you're able to use that data to make strategic business decisions. Our speakers today will be 2 of Liquid's analytics experts, Nicole Castelblanco and Alex Prestipino. With that, I will turn it over to Nicole to introduce Liquid's analytics maturity model.
So I want to just take a minute to talk about what it is that our analytics maturity model is. So over the years, all the clients I've worked with B2B clients, I've worked with B2C clients. A lot of times they come to me and they ask me, how do I use my data? I have all of this information, how do I use it? They've come to me at varying levels of analytics maturity. And what I mean by maturity is, there are certain steps that you have to take to make sure that the data that you're looking at is clean and reliable. And you also have to make sure that you're using the data to tell you how well your marketing efforts are working and how you need to make improvements. This is the 5-step process that we developed here at Liquid to take people through that and to get them into a place where they know that they can rely on what they're looking at and they can actually make business decisions based on what they're seeing in their data. So as we get through this Lunch and Learn, we're going to take the time to go through each one of these steps, and we're going to start off with sort of the basics and the setup of your analytics, and Alex is going to walk you through that part, and then I'll kind of take over and walk you through the more advanced stages of our analytics maturity model.
Thank you, Nicole. So the first step in the analytics maturity model is setting up a strong basic analytics foundation, and this is by far the most important step. Because if you don't have a strong analytics foundation, you're not going to be able to rely on your data to move forward and make more advanced models. So unfortunately, without good analytics, 97% of inbound marketing campaigns fail. So almost 100% of inbound marketing campaigns are failing due to the fact that organizations do not have good analytics set up to support their efforts. So that brings up the question, what are good analytics? Good analytics are not just setting it and forgetting it, installing an analytics platform on your website and not looking at it. You need to be actively going in and looking at your data on a daily, weekly, monthly basis so you can start to compare the data to the efforts that you're making in your marketing. So now you can start to think about what should your data be telling you. And I'm going to run through a few questions, and as I'm running through these, I want you to think about, can you answer these based on the data that you currently have in your analytics platform? So first, who's coming to your website? What audience? You can tell this typically based on the demographic data that's coming through, location-based data, and as well as the content that your audience is consuming on your website. Next, where are they coming from? In today's world, there's so many different sources that an audience can take to reach a website. For example, social media. They can come from Twitter or Facebook. They can come from a blog post that they read, an email that you sent out, or a display or paid search campaign that you're running. What content are they looking at? You can start to look at your data and see which pages on your website have the highest levels of engagement. When are they consuming that content? And how long are they staying? Timing is everything, and you need to make sure that you understand when your audience is coming to your site and how long they're staying, so you can make sure that you're delivering the most valuable content to them at the right time. And then where are they leaving from? Looking at your exit pages, and are they natural points of exit for somebody to leave your website? For example, if someone fills out a contact form and they reach a thank you page, that would be a natural point of exit leaving from that thank you page. If they're not leaving from points like this, you need to start looking at your data and thinking, what can I do to drive this user further into my website? So now that you know what your data should be telling you, you can start to think about your website goals. And this starts first with your business goals. Think about where you want your organization to be in the next year. Think about those revenue goals. Where do you want to be, and how are you going to get there? How are you going to measure it? And then you can start to think about, what is the purpose of your website? Why was it built, and what's the basic functionality that your website serves? And compare it to the story that you want to tell your audience. And think about, is the story that I want to give my audience actually what's happening on my website? So then you can start to think about, how are you going to measure that effectiveness, and what actions that users are taking on my website that are going to support my sales cycle. And these are things that you want to start thinking about as you're setting up your website goals. Now that you have your goals established, you can move on and start thinking about website tracking. So again, you want to track the actions that users are taking on your site. That could be a sale, signing up for your email newsletter, a form completion, a phone call, or downloading one of your new brochures. Whatever you decide to set up as tracking, they need to support those goals that you set up. So for example, if you're running a campaign to further help establish your organization as a thought leader in the industry, you might want to think about tracking that new white paper that you just put on your website and see how many downloads are coming through. And when you're setting up this tracking, it can be manually hard-coded on your website with the help of a developer, or you can use a tag manager system, which I like to use because I can set up this tracking all by myself and I don't need that help of a developer. So keeping your data organized is by far the most important step in phase 1 of our analytics maturity model. So you need to make sure that you have clean and organized data. So the first step in doing that is deciding ahead of time what a conversion is and comparing those website goals that you already set up to the actual hard conversions that can come from your website, and thinking about how your goals are going to be weighted to measure success on your website. And you need to develop tracking standards for all of the channels that are pointing towards your website. So essentially, every link that's pointing to your website can be tracked. And you can use tools like URL builders where you can add parameters into the links that are pointing to your websites, and you can track them to see where the sources of your data are coming from. So this is an example of one of our clients' data, and this is an example of what you don't want to do. Because if you look at number 1 and number 2, the source is coming from LinkedIn, but the medium is coming from what it appears to be 2 different sources, 2 different mediums. But the banner and display are actually the same thing. But because of the inconsistencies in their tracking, it split up the data into 2 line items in the analytics platform, which created inconsistencies and will cause confusion in the future. If you go to look at this data a year from now, you want to be able to understand exactly what it was and which data this is coming from, where the sources are coming from. So if tracking standards were applied in this example, these 10 line items could have really been simplified down to 4 or 5. So you want to make sure you're putting your tracking in place before your campaigns begin, or else you're going to end up looking like this guy with a whole mess of data where you have no idea where it's coming from, and it's going to be almost impossible to trace back and apply that data to your efforts. So it's really important to be consistent as well. You want to start establishing a consistent reporting schedule. Depending on the volume of traffic that's coming to your website, you may need to be looking at your data multiple times a day so you can start to understand what's happening with my data and how is it applying to the efforts that I'm working on in my marketing efforts. You want to make sure that you're using consistent metrics. Something that I see that's really common in analytics platforms where in reporting it's being confused. A lot of clients are mixing up the average cost per click with the average cost per conversion in their reports. They're very similar, But in reality, these are two extremely different metrics, and it's important to make sure you're being consistent so you can start to compare your current reports to your past reports and see how you've improved over time. And it's also important to show the right data to the right people, because not all of your website data is going to be valuable to every person in your company. So for example, your salespeople may not be as interested in your social media data as your social media person may be. So making sure you're showing the data to the people who actually can apply it to their efforts is really important to do on a consistent basis. So now that you have your solid basic analytics foundation established, we can move into phase 2 of the analytics maturity model, and you can start to look at the user experience journey across your website based on the story that your data is telling you. And you can start to make more strategic decisions through this user experience journey. So 88% of online consumers are less likely to return to a sale after a bad experience. Why would you risk losing 88% of your website traffic when you can just give them a positive user experience and give them what you want based on the data that's coming through? So whether you're a B2B company or a B2C company, the user experience on your website is going to affect the overall impression that these people have of your brand. So giving your audience what they want by applying the data and making the changes to your website will keep them coming back in the future. So now you can start to look at the journey that users are taking across your website based on that data. First, you can look at the most common landing pages. Are these the pages that you want people seeing the first time they come to your website? Are they providing the most value? The most common exit pages. What are the most common pages that people are leaving your site from? Are they natural points of exit? If not, what can you do to further drive them through your site to get them to that point of conversion that you already set up? And then you can start to map the customer journey on your website. From the point of entrance on your site to the point of exit, you can start to look at the different varying levels of engagement on the different pages of your site and see what pages are the most important to your audience, and you can start to produce more content that your audience wants. And it's also important to put your most valuable content early on in this user journey. So as soon as someone gets to your site, you're giving them exactly what they're looking for, and they're going to know that they can go further on through your site and eventually reach out and contact you, get to that point of conversion that you want them to. So website health is something that's really important to start moving into your current analytics strategy, and you can start using some other tools besides your basic analytics platform to determine the user journey on your website and where you can make improvements. So there's a number of things, metrics that you want to start looking at and adding into your consistent reporting schedule. So first, mobile friendliness. Thinking about, are the goals of your website matching up and accessible for people on mobile? So, for example, there's some situations on a mobile device that are not as positive of an experience as it is for someone on a desktop. For example, PDF downloads. It's much easier to find a PDF and download it on a desktop than on mobile. Are you tracking goals like this, and you want to make sure that if the majority of your audience is coming from mobile, that your goals are lining up with that? So you also want to look at some crawl errors, and you can start to see, are there pages that are 404ing? Are there broken pages that are keeping users from finding your website? Page load times. Is your site taking a long time to load that's affecting the user journey on your site that can be causing people to leave? Your link profile is something you also want to start incorporating into your monthly reporting, because you want to have a healthy amount of external links pointing to your website from reliable sources. And you also want a healthy amount of internal links within your website so you can naturally guide users through your website to those points of conversion. Engagement metrics are really important to look at, so you can start to see how long people are spending on your site, and you can develop the content to support that. And then also you can think about search visibility. Are search engines considering your website healthy enough to show in search result pages? These are all things you want to start incorporating into your strategy, and there's a lot of different tools that you can start to use as well. So you can start to take a closer look at the conversion funnel within your website itself to find any deeper problems that your analysis so far may not have uncovered. So you want to start monitoring how users are behaving at each step in your conversion funnel process, and think about, are they dropping off where they shouldn't be? So in this example, this is a typical cart checkout process. And typically what you're going to see is a very low amount of drop-off before a user makes that final step and makes that purchase, because they've already put in their billing information, they've already verified their order, they're committed to making that purchase, and they're pretty usually going to make that final step. If you're seeing 30% drop-off before the purchase, there may be something wrong. For example, your shipping costs might be too high, and that could be discouraging your users and causing them to go somewhere else, to leave. So if you're a B2B company sitting here right now, you might be thinking, the cart process is not relevant to me. But even though you might not have a process exactly like this on your website, you can start to establish your own funnels once your leads are being acquired through your website, and you can make this apply to you. And Nicole is going to go a little bit deeper into this later on. So now that you have that really strong analytics foundation established from phase 1, and you pretty much understand the user journey on your site based on what your data is telling you, you can start to bring your website data together and put it into one dashboard, and you can start to evaluate what your data is telling you and start to make improvements by piecing this data together. And you can make improvements to your current efforts. So now at this point, you're really ready to move on to phase 3 of our analytics maturity model. And you can start to move this data that you know is clean and you can rely on into phase 3 and start to move into more advanced models. So now Nicole's going to talk about phase 3, advanced analytics.